tour to be held on April 28th, visiting 5 active drainage projects, as well as inspection of the CCC Camp. The general public is invited and urged to attend. Beginning at 9 a.m., the party will leave the camp, visit a dragline project at the Burt Leonard Farm, 4 miles south of Noblesville. The second stop will be a concrete bridgehead wall construction project on the Lawrence Hester Farm. Lunch will be served at the CCC Camp at noon. A spoil bank leveling project using a Caterpillar tractor bulldozer will be seen in operation on the Leonard Luce Farm, just east of Leisure. The next stop will be the Edith Brewer Farm, 1 mile north of Summitville, where the largest tile reconstruction project in Indiana is laying a 22-inch reinforced concrete tile drain. The last stop, this is a good one, will demonstrate the ditching by dynamite on the C.H. Fear Farm near the Blackford-Jay County line. It goes on. So you get the idea. The CCC was not just sending men out there to the farms to help these, repair the gullies and so forth. They were educating them. They were giving them tools to be successful farmers, and they were grateful for that. They also built over 2,000 miles of roads in the state. You've got teenagers using dynamite. One fellow told me how we had a guy, he just didn't blow up the stumps. He could move that stump 2 feet to the left, 2 feet to the right. I mean, he was very good with that dynamite. And of course, the farm boys drove those tractors, no problem. They put up about 1,800 miles of telephone poles. Think about that. You're out there in rural Indiana, these CC guys come out. Imagine having a telephone. Up in Minnesota, where the bugs are really bad, one fellow told me, he said, the doctor in camp mixed this black tar solution with citronella, and they put it on their arms because the black flies up there were just wicked, okay? Put it on their faces. He said it worked great, but we were like walking fly paper. He said I was up there hanging telephone wires, and the flies would stick to your face, and they couldn't get off. They were stuck. They'd walk across and tickle your nose. You couldn't pick them off because your hands would get all greasy, He said the mosquitoes were so thick around us, we looked like ghosts. It was rough. It was rough out there. The CC's restored riverbanks in Indiana, washed out riverbanks, and put riprap. They did surveying across the state. And of course, these beautiful parks for sales, Pokagon, Clifty Falls, the Lincoln Historical Site, McCormick's Creek, Turkey Run. They're all fabulous. Maybe they didn't begin the parks. Sometimes the parks might have been started 10, 20 years earlier. But they came in and put in these beautiful shelter houses, the changing cabins, the bath houses, the beautiful hiking trails, and the lookout towers. And that was hard work. And we referred to that earlier. They worked with these stonemasons. They worked with these very skilled carpenters to create these beautiful buildings, many of which last today, and these beautiful inns, McCormick's Creek and Turkey Run. Pokagon, that got blown off by a tornado back in '74. But they built I was just up at Pokagon, they built a toboggan slide, and it's still in use today. It's really cool. So these are just great legacies. But the work was hard. No one ever made fun of the C's about their work. They might have said we poke along for WPA, but no. The CCCs, they worked in the cold. They used to order their boots 2 sizes too big, put crumpled newspaper on the toes. Keep their toes from freezing. They had a rule though. You didn't have to work if it was 20 below zero. One fellow told me how the thermometer in camp wasn't quite right. It would always hover around 19 below. It never got below 20. The whole winter, he said. One fellow said, 20 below? Well, heck, we worked when it was 35 below. Why? They keep one truck running all night long in the garage and use that to jumpstart the other trucks. But they were pretty good about it. If we showed signs of frostbite, they got us in pretty quickly. That same fellow told me it was the best year of his life. And how about fighting those fires? Oh, your eyes are singed, your nose is burning, you can't breathe. My son started a fire when he was 6 years old, and it took me a couple hours to put it out. I thought I was going to die. I can't imagine spending 8 hours out there. In the stories they tell, Oh, we jumped in the river. The crown fire went over our heads. Oh, we busted our pals out with a Caterpillar tractor, saved their life. Oh, there was a Girl Scout troop. We rescued them. I mean, just story after story. I was up in Columbus last year, and this guy, he said he was out west. He lost 2 of his buddies. Yeah, which one? They were gone. I said, what? What do you mean they were gone? Yeah, we lost them. Out west, that's where they lost their lives. Because you know, those fires go rushing up the mountain, you can't outrun them. There's nowhere to go. I mean, these flat areas, you can crawl behind rocks and, escape, but it was dead. Why did they put up with this hard work? Fighting fires, the bugs, the cold, love of family. Now, they may have joined to get out of town, to get 3 square meals a day, or adventure, but the reason they stuck it out was love of family. As we mentioned earlier, they were paid $1 a day. Now, $1 back then, young ladies, is worth $20 today. You could buy a dozen eggs for 7 cents, candy bars for a nickel, 5 gallons of gas for $1. Think about that. That was a lot of money, $1 a day. And they got all the food they could eat and a bed to sleep in. So $25 was sent directly home to the folks. And the stories they tell. Oh, my sister went to teacher's college with that money. Oh, my mother paid the back taxes on the farm. I remember a guy coming up after my program, an elderly gentleman. He shook my hand, and he wouldn't stop shaking my hand. I wasn't in the seas, but my brother was. Had $25 a month of food on the table for my loving brothers and sisters. Kept us alive, I'm telling you. He kept us alive. I don't know what we would have done. And tears were coming down his cheeks. He was very emotional. And the reason I share that, when you think of the impact of the seas, 3 million nationally, heck, they all had 4, 5, 6 dependents. So it touched another, 15, 25 million? Touched a lot of people's lives out there. Believe you me. In my book, I tell the story how my main character walks in the bunkhouse. His buddy, Jose, he's probably a 20-year-old. He's a Mexican. He's sitting there crying. What are you crying for? And he motions his head, and there's a letter next to him on the bunk. Oh, you want me to read that? So he picks up the letter and he reads it. Dear Jose, we're so proud of you and the fine job you're doing. Your last paycheck helped us buy lots of food, like cornmeal, beans, and sugar. The pantry's so full you wouldn't recognize it. Mama spends a lot of time in the kitchen singing, she's so happy. There's enough money left over from your last check to buy your sister an Easter dress, a pair of shoes, and an Easter bonnet. Wish you could have seen how pretty she looked at church. We thought of you that day. I'm going to skip ahead here. Oh, I know why you're so unhappy. There wasn't enough money for your parents to buy anything nice for themselves. Jose nodded. Think about that. He wanted his mom and dad to have something nice too. That's how much they love their families. I ran across a story in northern Michigan. The cook was throwing out a dozen boxes of stale cereal. One of the guys asked permission to have it. He put it in a gunny sack. Got permission to go home. He hitched a ride on a freight train in the dead of winter. An open rail car. You know how cold that is for 8 hours? Rode that rail car, hopped off when he got to his town, jumped off a moving train, then walked 19 miles to his family's home to give his brothers and sisters that stale cereal. They loved their families. That's why they stuck it out. And some of them left because they were homesick. I don't want to give you the illusion they all stuck it out. Oh, no. Some of them couldn't take the hard work. You give a guy a planting bar, he plants 1,000 trees. Oh, I'm never going to walk again. It was rough working in the cold. But a lot of them left because they missed their mothers. I was told that they often would cry when these rookies came in their pillows. I asked a fellow once, I said, did they really cry? He said, yeah, I did. And I stopped asking after that. You've been raised with and they're so close to each other, families back then, through that poverty. A woman up in Wisconsin told me how her brother wrote home and begged for somebody to come visit him in camp. He was so homesick. And her dad couldn't do it. But she said, I was just 14. I didn't have a driver's license, but I borrowed my dad's truck on a Saturday morning. My brother drew a little map. I drove that 35 miles out and picked him up on Saturday at noon, took him out to lunch in town, and as I told him stories about the family back home, tears were coming down his cheeks. Isn't that amazing? Yet these same guys would box you in a New York second. They all had boxing teams. They were all tough. They used to keep 2 pairs of boxing gloves in every bunkhouse. And if 2 guys were arguing, the barracks leader, the barracks leader was usually the best boxer in that bunkhouse. So they had 50 guys in the house. He'd say, okay, enough of this arguing. He'd take down the gloves, he'd lace them up, go outside, make a circle, and the guys would have a boxing match until one of them hit the ground. And then they'd take off the gloves and shake hands after that. That's how they maintain discipline. I mean, you got a lot of tough characters in those camps, right? So that's how they had a rule that if 2 guys were fighting, you had to break it up or you got in trouble too. And if somebody snuck some hooch in the bunkhouse, hey, get that out of here, we're all going to get in trouble. That's how they kept a lid on things. They forced them to come together, to stick together. Anyway, I'd like to show a short video from my PBS film. This came out, as I said, in 1993. We'll see if this works here. I think the power might have gone off. Okay, we're going to have to go back to the beginning. This opening scene here is a scene from the only standing camp in the state of Michigan, up in the Upper Peninsula. It's how it looks today. And as you see, it looks like an army camp with its, and you have, this is very typical, old abandoned chimneys sitting out in the boondocks. The camps had an equipment building, with hundreds of axes and rakes and shovels, a supply building with bedding, uniforms. Every camp had an infirmary with a full-time doctor. They had a blacksmith shop, a garage with Caterpillar tractors. They had a chaplain, yeah. And one fellow told me a chaplain came in, he gave a Jewish, a Protestant, and a Catholic service. The same man. Isn't that amazing? But that's what a CCC camp looks like. Okay, now we're going to go back in time.
I'll tell you what, how much I enjoyed firefighting. I never worked so hard in my life. First of all, your feet are always burning. Your hands are always hot. Your throat is burning with smoke. You stink like a pig. Your clothes always got singed. When I see these forest fires and movies nowadays and all that there, I feel, if they have equipment to fight fires. We had a shovel.
Getting up in the morning out of your warm bed and hitting that cold air when you go out there to the bathhouse to wash up, I couldn't get adjusted to that. You went on a project, you weren't allowed to build a fire until you started to work, an hour after you started to work. Then you built a fire. That was the most difficult thing that ever happened to me. Then I realized I wasn't home. That I was at a CCC camp.
You
used what we call a spud bar, and you jabbed that into the ground, you pulled it back, jabbed it down again and pulled it back. You had a nice little square hole. You grabbed the tree, you snapped the roots down, pushed the roots on down, pulled the bar out, jammed it back about an inch back, pulled it on and pushed it forward. It was hard on those kids in Detroit that had never done any real physical work, but it made men out of them.
And we get up in the morning, go get our axes, they were sharp. New handles, no slivers. And I can remember, I would always try to get my own axe, number 17. You didn't know what one you was going to get, but he did pass them out in the morning when you went to get on the horsey truck to go to the woods. But I'd always say, number 17, Isaac. And I'd get my 17 if nobody else had got first. I'll tell you, it's a lot of fun to work in the woods. Because it's just, you can see that you've done something.
Lights, please. You can see that you've done something. That's why these guys love working out in the woods. You know, they planted trees, they worked with the farmers. They could see the impact of what they were doing. And I can't stress that the CCCs have taught them how to work. What does it mean to work? By the way, this is my Daisy May cap. This is what they worked out in the field. And they have, this is called a neckerchief. On a hot, dusty day, can pull it over their face. If they're fighting forest fires, a little protection over their mouth. But they wore dungarees, blue jeans, and t-shirts in the field with very thick belts. But getting back to the work, and I can't help but stress this. What does it mean to learn how to work? It means doing something that you normally wouldn't do if you had a choice. For example, fighting forest fires. Nobody in their right mind wants to fight a forest fire. You're out there for 8 hours, but they stuck it out. Working in the cold, working in bug-infested swamps, hard conditions. It taught them how to endure, not to give up, how to innovate. They talked about when a tractor broke down, they're building a bridge or something. Things go wrong, they get in their hands and knees, they fix it. It taught them to work. Life skills. And these guys, they came back, changed men. They had great attitudes. We can do it was the slogan of the CCCs. We can do it. And when I give programs in high schools and middle schools, I talk about the importance of not giving up. We live in a culture where people, it's easy to give up these days. And, oh, I'm not going to work. I can collect welfare. I don't need to get an A. I can get a B. That's okay. You know, so we learn from our great-grandparents. They didn't give it up. We don't give up. That's what it's all about. Well, I mentioned about food, how important that was. Oh, boy. Let me give you an example. One fellow told me, he said when he came before he got into camp, he and his buddy were so hungry. They walked into the mayor's office. This was in Flint, Michigan. They said, Mr. Mayor, we're starving. We can't find any work. We're going to steal. What are you going to do about it? Well, the mayor sent him to his brother, who ran a company, ran a hardware store. He gave those two teenagers 5 dimes. And they bought 2 loaves of day-old bread, a pig's hock, that's a soup bone, and a sack of potatoes. They boiled that soup bone, right? They dipped the potatoes in bread in it. It kept them alive for a week. So you can imagine how happy they were. Above the door in the mess hall, take all that you want, eat all that you take. Pancakes, fried potatoes, scrambled eggs, bacon. Oh my gosh, all you can eat. Now for lunch, they brought up big pots of stew. This is military stew, 4 or 5 leftover meats, root vegetables. You fill up your mess kit twice, fresh baked bread sliced 2 inches thick, grab a handful of cookies, oatmeal, raisin, molasses, ginger cookies. The average CC put on 18 pounds, and that was muscle. For supper, they started them off with soup. You had to eat your soup, the vegetable soup, okay? Well, a fellow came up and told me he was from Cloquet, Minnesota. He said a rookie came in. It was his first night at supper. And he was on his 3rd bowl of soup, just chowing down like crazy. Well, how come you eating so much soup for? I'm hungry. Well, save some room for supper. Well, I thought this was supper. Oh no, we get dessert too. Well, what's dessert? He had never heard of dessert. He's 18 years old. Yeah. Now for the main course, lamb, pork chops, corned beef, meatloaf, pot roast. I met a fellow in a nursing home last year, because librarians will sometimes send me out to people. Oh, we got the CC boy, can't make it, and I go out and visit him. I said, what was your favorite dish? He smiled. Oh, I'd never had Virginia baked ham until I got into a CCC camp. Oh, he just brought a smile to his face. These guys were so grateful. And they had dessert. They had a baker in every camp. Pudding, pie, cake. Does that sound good, young lady? Oh, yeah. Well, there were some surprises, though. One fellow was out in Idaho. He said they had an old lumberjack baker who made the most delicious cinnamon rolls. And he said he peeked in the back door of the bakery as he was kneading the dough. He said that old lumberjack had no teeth. He was chewing tobacco like this. And the tobacco juice was just dripping down his chin. He said, I never ate those cinnamon rolls again. True story. Yeah, so there were surprises. You know, they would have to wipe the green slime off the hot dogs. There were purple egg yolks. I've heard them all. But pretty much the food was good. They were very grateful for it. One fellow loved it so much, he said, I felt like shouting hallelujah every time I walked in the mess hall. So I said, darn, that sounds like a song to me. So I made a little song. You can join me on the chorus if you like. It goes, if my stomach could talk, it would shout hallelujah. There you go. Way back in the Great Depression, my stomach was in a mild recession. Folks were poor, people were hungry, couldn't get work all over the country. Well, Franklin D. built for you and me some work camps called CCC. Put us to work, fed our bellies with lots of food like bread and jelly. Here we go. If my stomach could talk, it would shout hallelujah. Yes, and a walk, gonna come running right to ya, 'cause it's chow time. Goose eggs, duck eggs, hot on the griddle. What the farmer brings is always a riddle. We eat what's put in front of our face. It's chow time, give me a taste. Corned beef, roast beef, smothered in gravy. Piles of noodles, long and wavy. Turkey at Christmas filled with stuffing. Apple pie, hot from the oven. If my stomach could talk.